Hello everybody. This is our first video that we're going to be using Fusion 360 to be able to start drawing our cylinder for our model engine. This is going to be the first in 3 videos that we do for this. We will start out by drawing our cylinder in Fusion 360. Then after that we'll create our tool paths using our CAM. And then finally we'll go into the shop and we'll learn how to machine it on our Tormach 770s. The first thing that we do is when we log into Fusion 360, we want to make sure that it is set up properly for what we need to do. On the top left, we have a data panel. It's this little waffle looking button in the top corner. We want to open that up, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are in our proper workspace. So I'm changing it. I'm in a couple of workspaces. I'm changing it from our River Falls Tech Ed to my personal one, my account. And what we'll do then is we want to make a new project. I already have one for CNC manufacturing. That's where I've been doing a lot of my work already. But for these demo videos, we will be creating a new one. So I'll create a new project, and I will name it CNC MFG. After we create a new project, we want to double click to get into that folder. What this will do is create a folder where all of our parts will be stored. This is a whole lot like how Google Drive works. Right? So here we have a folder. The next thing that we want to do is we want to save our file into that folder. So up on the top left, here we have save. We'll click that, and we are going to name this, this is 0101 cylinder. And for our location, we want to double check and make sure that we have our location as the CNC MFG, which is that same folder that you just created just a little while ago. If you want to do manufacturing, that's all good. Just make sure that you have it in the right folder. So then what we'll do is we'll click save. And you can see that I have 01 cylinder being put in right there. So what I can do if I want to get into more real estate on my screen is I can click on the X for the closed data panel. Now a little tour around Fusion 360 is we have on the left hand side here we have our browser. So if I start referencing our browser, this is where I'm talking about. This will show us our different bodies and different construction planes and that type of stuff over here. You'll also see a timeline on the bottom here. Every time that you make a sketch or do any sort of extrusion, you'll see that pop up over here. If you need to go back into a sketch to change something, if you mess something up, or if you want to edit something that you previously did, you come down to our timeline, you can right click it, and you're able to hit edit, and then you are able to edit that sketch. Down here, these are all of our different view options. We have, you can change some display settings. We don't really go too much in there. Next up, on the top here, we have our little orbit cube that allows us to move around. If we don't want to click there, another shortcut that you can do is if you look at your mouse, you have a scroll wheel. You press down on that scroll wheel and also hold down Shift on the keyboard, and you're able to orbit around. If you just hold down the scroll wheel, once we start sketching, you'll see that I'll do what's called panning around, where you hold down your scroll wheel and you're able to move around. The last thing with our mouse is we can zoom in and out using our scroll wheel up and down, and you'll see that, and I'll call it out once we start drawing. We have 2 more things that we need to change in our normal environment right here. The first thing I want us to do is come up to your head right here where it has your account, and I want you to go down to preferences. So when we come down to preferences in our general, we want to look for default modeling orientation. Sometimes it'll default to Y up, and if you remember in our intro to CNC, we always want to make sure that we have our Z axis up. So what we will do is we'll change it from Y up to Z up, press apply, and then press OK. The last thing we want to do is we want to change our units from millimeters to inches. All of our drawings are going to be in inches. So what I'm going to do is my units up here. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to select my change active units, and I am going to change my unit type from millimeters to inches, and then I'm going to select set as default. Mine was already selected as default, so it's a little bit grayed out, but if yours is not previously selected as default, make sure that you check that box and press OK. All right, we have one last thing that we need to do. Is if you've noticed, we changed our Z as up, but in our little orbit cube, our Z is still coming towards the front. So what we will do is we are going to close this down. Just not all of Fusion 360, we're just going to close this tab. And I don't want to save that. I'm going to open a new one so that now it opens up that Z is going up, just like that. So what we're going to do is we are going to then save this again. We'll overwrite that cylinder. So if I save it, type 01 cylinder, click save. And if you accidentally have two, we can always just delete the first one. And once you have all of that set up, we are ready to go. If we look at our sheet, or at our print, here we have our cylinder for our model engine. Right? And on here, we take a look at it. It is essentially a rectangle that has some rounded corners. It has a large bore going through that our piston will be going up and down in. It has some holes on the sides here, and those are going to be for quarter 20 bolts that go all the way down into the crankcase. We have two little 1/8 inch holes for roll pins that we can align our cylinder head to. And then we also have two holes on either side here that go all the way through. And we have two smaller holes on either side that are threaded for 1032 bolts to be able to attach they're like little cylinder flanges to kind of simulate like intake or an exhaust valve, or not valve, a port. Okay, and we'll take a look at all the dimensions as we go through this, and I'll explain my thought process as we draw this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the outline of this rectangle. I'm going to make all of these circles in there as well because they are not threaded, and these go all the way through. I can tell that they go all the way through because if we look at our callouts right here, I've got a dimension of 0.266. We have a tolerance that it can go above 4 thou and below 1 thou, meaning it can be a little bit bigger than 0.266 by 4 thou. So the largest acceptable dimension after we machine this would be 0.27, and the lowest acceptable dimension would be 0.265. We have this through right there, meaning that it goes all the way through. Next up, we also have this larger hole here, which has a diameter of 1.45, and that needs to go all the way through. These little 1/8 inch holes do not go all the way through because we have a diameter of 0.125 inches, and they only go down 0.188 inches right there. So we know that those don't go all the way through. If all of these were holes that did not go all the way through, what I would do is I would just create that rectangle. I would extrude it up, and then I would put another sketch on top of that rectangle, and then I would start cutting down. But in this instance, I've got these 5 circles that go all the way through, so that I can include that in my first sketch. So we'll take a look at it. I'm going to come down here onto this view. Just looking through our print, here we have, this would be our front view, this would be our top view, and these would be 2 section views. This would be considered our bottom view. So this section view right here is showing as if we took an imaginary cut of our piece right here, and it is going towards the right. So we can see that we have those 1032 threaded holes right there. And this one is if we were to cut it straight through these holes right here as well, that we're able to get some of these locations of these circles, or these holes. All right, but For this one, I'm going to look at our bottom view because I have my overall size for this. I have 2.375 wide and 1.875 tall. I'm going to come back to Fusion 360 and I'm going to create a new sketch. So create a sketch, and this is very vital when we do this. We want to create our sketch on the X. So our X is our red line, our Y is our green line, and our blue is our Z is our blue line right here, right? So I want to put this on my XY plane, which is going to be this plane right here. So what I'll do is I will create a 2-point rectangle, and I'm going to bring my cursor down to our origin right there to place our first corner, and I'm going to go up and to the right, and if I remember, is 2.375 that way. And if I want to toggle between our dimensions for our rectangle, I can press tab. Okay. Notice I'm going up and to the right when I draw this, because what I want to do is, or sorry, not up and to the right, we want to go down and to the right. Because when we start machining this, remember a lot of our origins will be on the top left corner. So we are going to make this a lot like how we would machine it. So 2.375, and I believe it was 1.8 something. 2.375, and then we'll go 1.8. So after I clicked, we have our 2.375 going to the right, we have 1.8 coming down. And we'll take a look back at the print, and oh, I made a mistake. My width of that rectangle was correct, and it was 2.375. But the height of that was not 1.8, it was actually 1.875. But we can fix that. So if we have a dimension that is a little bit off, or we press enter or something like that, and we mess something up, it's all right. What we can do is we can double click on that dimension. So instead of just 1.8, I need to change that to 1.875. And then we press enter, and it'll update that for us. If we take a look at our rectangle, we notice that all of our lines are black. You'll see as we sketch later on, some of our lines going in will be blue. And the difference between the two is that blue are unconstrained lines. We want to make sure that when we are sketching, we have fully constrained sketches, meaning that all of our lines are going to be black. To create fully constrained sketches, we need to add sketching constraints as well as dimensions to be able to do that. The next thing I want to do is I want to create these rounds for these corners, and what we'll do is we'll look around our print to see where we have any notes or anything like that, or any dimensions going to our rounded corners. And on our top view over here, we can see that we have an R, which stands for radius, of 0.25, which is a 1/4 inch, and it's at our 4 places. And our 4 places would be that corner, that corner, that corner, and finally that corner. So we'll come back to Fusion 360, and I'm going to create a fillet on each of these corners. So we go down to modify, and we have fillet, which is right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on our first corner, and it gives us a radius of 0.5 right away, which is a little too big. So what I'll do is I'll type in 0.25 for that corner, and then I will go around and I will click on the other 3 corners so that we have fillets on each of those corners. And then what I can do is I can press enter, and we have our fully constrained rectangle with our filleted corners. The next step that we want to do is we want to put in our holes right here. So I'm going to put in these 4 holes to begin with, and we'll take a look, and these holes are 0.266 in diameter, and they go all the way through. So I'm going to put in 4 holes at 0.266, and then we'll come back to the print and we'll take a look at the position of that. So I'm going to select my center diameter circle, click and make a circle. So I clicked once, and I'm going to drag out, And my diameter for that was 0.266, so I type that in and press enter. Notice when I have an unconstrained sketch, it is blue. So if I pull my mouse off, my cursor off, it's blue. What that means is I have a dimension on there, but I can move this around. So my position of my circle on this sketch is not fully constrained. I'm going to come back to my center diameter circle and select that again. I'm going to create another circle at 0.266, hit enter, make another circle drag it out at 0.266, hit enter, and finally we have one more circle that's at 0.266. Now, I accidentally clicked it before I typed in the dimension. What we can do if we want to add those dimensions is I can come up to the top and I can click on sketch dimension up here. So we'll click that. I come on down and select the outside line of my circle, and I'll just drag it off a little bit over here. So right now it says that my dimension is at 0.367. All I have to do is type in 0.266, and that will update for us nicely. Now remember, all of these circles are not constrained yet. So what we need to do is we need to go back to the print and find where the dimensions are to be able to position these properly. So we'll take a look at the print again, and we can see on our bottom view right here that these two holes right here, they're 1/4 of an inch from this edge to the center of that circle. These two holes are going to be 2.125 or 2 1/8 from that edge to the center of those. So we'll go back to Fusion, we'll click on sketch dimension, click on that edge right there, click on the center of that circle, bring my dimension up, and that is 250 thou or 0.25. Same thing with this one, 250 thou. We'll go to the center of that circle, and that one is 2.125 or 2 125 thou. And same thing with that. All right, let's go back to the print and see where they need to be constrained going up and down. So if we were to look around, we need to find a dimension that goes from this top edge or this bottom edge to the center of these circles here. And we can actually find that on this section view over here. So we can see that from the top coming down, our circles or our holes are 250 thou going down, and they're 1 and 625 thou coming down all the way from the top. Let's go back to Fusion, click on the top line, come down, type in 250 thou, and you'll notice now that this circle has a dimension for the diameter and also has 2 positional dimensions, and it is fully constrained, and it changed from blue to black. So then we'll do the same thing right there, 250, come down here. This one is 1.625, and then finally our last dimension for these holes is on this side over here, 1.625, just like that. Back to the print. Our last feature for this sketch, we want to draw this large hole in the center, which is 1.45 in diameter. You can see right there, and it goes all the way through. So we'll go back, create a circle, and there are 2 ways we can do this. We can either make our circle and dimension it into the center, or what we can do is we can use these snaps inside Fusion to be able to find the absolute center of these. So what I'm going to do is after I selected my circle, I'm going to bring my cursor over to this line on the side here. I'm not clicking, but I can bring my mouse over and it's going to snap to that edge. I bring it up and you can see that when I get to the center, I get a X with a little triangle on it. And if I start bringing that to the left, my cursor is kind of snapped to the center of that. And you can see that little construction line there. I'll bring it to the top, snap it to the center up there, and now when I bring to the intersection of that, my mouse is somewhat snapped into the center of the sketch. So what I'll do then is I will click and I will drag out my cursor and my circle, and I'll type in the dimension of 1 and 450 thou. Press enter. Now, just because I put that in there, I'm not fully constrained. I still need to dimension that. So we'll click on sketch dimension, click on the center point right there, click on the top, and according to the print, that's 0.938 or 0.9, just like that, right? We have that, where did it go? Right there, 0.938, and then center going this way is 1.188. So for that, I'm going to click, 1.88. So there we have our first sketch. The next thing that we want to do is we want to extrude this. So I'm going to go to our finished sketch. Okay? And we want to extrude, which is this button right here. So I'm going to bring this on down, or I'm going to bring my cursor down, and you can see that I'm able to highlight different sections of this sketch. We have all of these enclosed edges. What I want to do is I want to bring it to the space where it's the inside of the rectangle, but not the inside of our circles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that. If we go back to the print, the thickness of this is 0.781, which we can find right there. Back to Fusion, I'm going to extrude down negative 0.781. Now this might be a little bit different than what you have possibly done in the past for our machining, or sorry, for our drawing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit OK, and we'll explain it in just a second. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up, you don't have to do this on your screen, but I'm going to put in the origin. Okay, when we machine this, we are going to be zeroing out on the top left corner of our part. So the reason that we went down, most of the time when we draw CAD, if you're going to be 3D printing or something like that, is you go positive in your Z. But for our first one right here, we are going to go negative in the Z. The reason is that when we bring this into our manufacturing workspace in our next video, we'll have our origin, which is in our top left corner, so that it's right there and it coincides with when we zero out this part in our CNC mill. All right, so I'm going to hide that origin, and we'll continue on to our next holes. So our next two features, we have these two holes right here. They are 0.125 or 125 thou, and it goes down 188 thou into the top of that part. We'll see that it is centered, so 0.941 coming down right there. And coming in, it's 0.1875 on that side, and 2.125 over, oh, not that one, 2.19 right there for that one. So we'll go back to Fusion. I'm going to create a new sketch, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are selecting this top face. So I selected a create sketch. I'm going to select the top face of my part right there. I'm going to then create two center diameter circles, and these are going to be a diameter of 125 thou. So I'm going to click and bring out, drag out. I'm going to type in 0.125 for our first one. Notice it's still blue. We still have to dimension the position of that. Create another center diameter circle, click drag out, 0.125. And then I'm going to create or click on my sketch dimension. Click that. I'm going to zoom in. This is when I'm using my scroll wheel to go up or down. I'm going to come in. I'm going to select the side edge right there. Click on the center. And I'm going to drag out a little bit so that it's off my sketch and it's a little bit easier for me to see. And my dimension for that is 0.188. From the top, my dimension is 0.941. From this side, we're coming from this edge right here. We're coming in. We're selecting that center. I'm going to bring my dimension off of the part. And that dimension is 2.19. And going down, it's the same as that side. Click on the top, or the top edge right there. Click on the center point. And that is also 0.941 or 941 thou. So now that those are both fully constrained, our sketches turn from blue to black, we can finish that sketch, and we can go hit extrude, and I'm going to select the two circles that we just drew. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to orbit just to make it a little bit easier for us to see, and again, how to do that, you hold down shift and you click on your scroll wheel, and I'm going to click my arrow and I'm going to drag down a little bit. Notice before we had a new body in our operation. If I drug this up, we could do a new body. If I wanted to make little pins in there, I could make that a join. But what I want to do is I actually want to cut into this material. So if we change it from join to cut, we have, you can see a little preview that's red there. And on the print it said 0.188, so I'm going to be going down negative 188 thousandths. Press enter, and now we have our two pinholes created. The last thing that we need to do is we need to put in our two 3/8 inch holes over there and there so that we can have a hole for our vent, our flange, like an exhaust and a air intake port, and then we also have to have two threaded holes. So what I want to do is I want to put it on this side first. I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm going to select this face. And it'll orient so it's normal to us. Go back to the print. We can see that we have a hole that is 0.375 in the center of that part all the way through. And to fully constrain it, it's 1.188 coming in, and it is 0.391 coming down. We'll go back to Fusion, create a center diameter circle, make sure that we are right in the center, just how we did before. We snap our points. We are going to put a 3/8 inch hole in there, which is 375 thou. Enter, and I'm going to finish that sketch. I'll select extrude, click on the circle, and I'm going to drag my arrow all the way through to make a hole that goes all the way through both sides of my part. And then I'll press OK. The next thing that I want to do is I want to put my two holes in here so that we are able to thread those holes for those 1032 bolts that will go into there. What I'm going to do for this is I will create a hole. So we have a hole feature that is able for us to model threaded holes. So after we select our hole feature, we need to select our face or sketch points. To select our face, I'm just going to select this face right here, just as if we were to create a sketch. Now, it drops in a huge hole right away, and we'll be changing this and editing this as we go. All right? So first off, we have these two references underneath that face. So for my first reference, that I'm going to hit select, and I'm going to pick this top edge right here. And from there, I get a dimension, and the dimension for that one is 0.391 or 391 thou, which is what we got from the print. I'm able to press enter for there. My second reference is going to be off of this edge. Now it might be a little bit tricky to select this edge. We want to make sure that we're not selecting the edge of this face, but this outside edge of our part right there. Bring that back in. So for my second reference, I'm going to select that edge right there. And we get our other dimension in there. And the dimension for that one is 0.688. So we have our position for our hole. We just need to actually get our hole done proper. Okay? So for this one, we are going to, so we'll take a look back at the print, and it's not calling out any sort of counter sink or a counter bore. All it's saying is that we need two holes drilled on this side and that side that are going to be 1032 threads and that are going to go down 1/4 of an inch. So we'll go back to Fusion, and it is going to be a simple hole. If it called out a counter bore or a counter sink, we'd select one of those two, but it's just going to be a simple hole. For our hole tap type, we either have simple, which would be no threads, that would just be a regular hole. We have a clearance, which would be as if you wanted to have a bolt go through it so that it would be just big enough to be able to fit around that, but we don't want that. The last two that we have are taper tapped. This would be like a pipe thread, or tapped, which would be like our machine screw. We want to have this tapped. The next one, we have an offset and we have a full. If we go back to our print, it just says that we have a full that goes down 0.25. So I'm going to go back to Fusion, and my thread offset is going to be full. This offset right here would be as if you didn't want threads going all the way down. All right, drill point, we are going to have an angle for that, and our angle is going to wind up being 118 degrees. So our depth, we saw before, we want that at 1/4 of an inch or 250 thou, so 0.25. And then for our thread type, we don't have to do any calculations. We don't have to look for thread pitch or anything like, or the dimensions. All that we really need to do is we need to look for the designation. And if we go back to the print, our designation is a 1032. So we will make sure that we want our ANSI unified screw threads. We're going to go to designation, and we don't see our 1032. So we'll go back up, and for that, we want to find the 0.19. And you can see, so these are all of our decimal. We come up here, we have your 0 through 12. We want a size 10, which is right there. Designation will come down. We wanted a 1032 UNF, which is right there. It's a 2B, and we want right-handed threads. So then what we can do is we can press OK right there. And what that'll do for us is that will essentially drill and model that hole with the threads in there for us. So what we'll do then is we'll put in another hole on same thing. So on that side, it remembered what we did last time around. So the size, we already have the number 10, 1032. We have to change how deep it goes though to 250 thou. It's a simple hole type, tapped. We're going to have an angled drill point. What we just need to update is we need to update our references. So I already selected my face. My first reference is going to be off the top. And again, off of the top, that's 0.391. Our second reference is going to be off of this edge, and that is going to be, my apologies, it is not off of that edge, it is this first edge. And just to show you, it is going from this edge coming in, and that's 1.688. So we selected off of that one. We'll change that to 1 and 688 thou, right there. So we have our second hole put in. Now if we look at our print, we have these two holes already called out by this note right here. 1032 down 1/4 of an inch at our two places, those two places. But we don't actually see this backside yet on this view or this view or that view. But on this view over here, we can see that we have a note called out that it's the exact same thing as the previous side or on the other side. And in our ISO view over here, we can actually see these two holes that are already drawn in there with our hidden lines. So we'll go back to Fusion, and I'm going to spin this around. A reminder to orbit, you hold down Shift and your scroll wheel, and I'm able to just rotate this around. So we'll put in a hole. This should be pretty easy for us now. Everything's already updated. I've got my first reference to there, and that one, again, just like from the front side, it's at 688 thou. And my second reference from the top is 391 thou, going down. And I have my hole in there. Let's say I accidentally messed something up with that hole. I can right click right there, hit edit feature, and it brings this back up. So there, if let's say I accidentally did 1028 instead of 1032, I can switch that back to 1032. I did see that I messed something. Instead of 0.6, I need that at 250 thou, not as deep. So there we go. And we have one more hole that we need to put in, one more tapped hole. So I'm going to select hole. I select that face. It goes down 250 thou. We have our 1032. Our two references, I'm going to come off of that top. That top, again, is 391 thou. And the reference for this one as well, off that backside, is 1 and 688 thou. So there is your finished part for our CAD. In our next video, we will be going over our CAM strategies and how we would actually mill this part out. Before we close this down, we want to make sure that we save this. So right now you can see that we have 01 cylinder V1. I'm going to click on save, and we might get a little pop-up window. We'll press OK. And we just want to double check, so click on the little waffle in the top right for your data panel. And we want to make sure that change to V2, meaning that it is updated and that there's no stars there. If you want to double check, you can also see that we have a timestamp on when this was saved. All right, so there you go, and we will see you in the next video.